I'm a great lover and a great friend, but I'm a piece of shit boyfriend. And I'm a great lover and a great friend, but I'm a piece of shit boyfriend. And ride back over to your house, I try to work things out, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
In 1971, I started working at the African American Museum. It was a new museum, so the requirements on me was much greater than at the other museums because they inherited a system. It was a bureaucracy. But what I was working with was something that I had to figure out what exactly is a museum and what are we supposed to be doing, because our issues were different. I started building exhibits that dealt with the history at that point in time, and people were pushing me in that direction. Tell something about what we were doing, so and so, how we got here. And after about 15 years of that, any subject on this planet, if you study it long enough, you're going to find yourself repeating yourself with the next scholar you read. Most of this material is in the books I just read. So your learning experience will take you in a circle. So the circle only took me about 7 years to realize there was not too much more I could learn about Africans in this country. Why did I use mirrors? And that was like opening up a whole world.
Yeah.
The significance of mirrors. And I was trying to give a perspective on how the artist and what he does has been kicked out of his place as the most important person in the community. You got to be able to control the people that you're left to protect. Where we are today with art, it does one or two things. It can inspire you or depress you, and you have no idea where it's coming from. So your brain will always take you back to what you thought you didn't know anything about, and it will present it to you in the way that it was presented to you in that time. But then one day I saw this table, it had some bees on it. So I said, oh, bees. That's interesting. What are you going to do with bees? So the guy that was selling the bees, I said to him, I like that strand you got on. Why don't you sell me that strand you have on? So I'm thinking I'm being clever and you're going to get the strand of bee. He took offense to it. I'm like, okay, what did I do? He said, oh, my brother, let me explain something to you. I know here in America you think everything is for sale. So he began to talk to me about the history of those bees. He went back 5 generations with these bees that he had on. Now, to me, that was fascinating because I'm in an area, the only kind of history you have is 3-dimensional history, pots, pans, clothing, and things that people have worn. But here was a system where the history was recorded with every person in the community. And he really said something that really knocked me on my feet. He said, bees were never worn for adornment. Wait a minute, what else could they be used for? So he said, from age 3, you were given bees to wear to let everyone know that you have gone through your rite of passage or your initiation. And from that point on, every 3 years, you did something to go through another initiation, and you wore beads. And it's easy for people to know if you have gone through your rites of passages or your initiation if you're wearing these beads. If you don't, you couldn't even become a man or a woman without going through an initiation. So I said, okay, I got this. I think I can work with this. So I hoarded. I collected every bead that I knew was available. See, I studied art at Wayne State, and they was telling me, you know, you should go in a room, sit there, and figure something out, and then just be able to philosophize about it. I said, wait a minute, that's not making sense to me. There's a book that I wrote called Iron Teaching Rocks How to Rust. Iron Teaching Rocks How to Rust. It's a metaphor. And it's a metaphor that deals with the relationship between Africans and Europeans. Do you know, if you are assimilating or learning someone else's culture, your own culture deteriorates. So one day you might wake up and think you are Chinese, but you actually look like an Indian. That's how powerful knowledge is. So I chose to make this metaphor into relationships between Africans and Europeans, just to point out how devastating it is when you are forced to give up your language and your culture and mimic someone else's. I did some studying on languages. You know, the technical definition of language is mother tongue. They couldn't find no substitute. They had to use mother. So there's an installation out there that's called Iron Teaching Rocks Table Manners. If you've traveled over the planet, if you visit a culture, guess how they're going to try to make you feel at home? They're going to give you something that they eat. But they're not going to tell you, this is the way we eat it. You got to use spoon number 7 to pick the bean up, spoon 12 to eat it. It's just eat. But if someone is teaching you their culture, it means that they've already taught you their language. So now they're upgrading you. Because when you're eating, someone is teaching you table manners. It's not the same as someone sharing the best food they have to eat. So if I'm teaching you table manners, guess what else I'm teaching you? What art is. Back from 1971 to 1985, I probably would never have been able to do this, because we would send a flyer out. Flyers was the only way of communicating back then, unless you had a stamp to mail some stuff out. French fry, chicken fry that's Friday at the Museum of African American History. We get hate mail back. But now, it's pretty much gone. So in order to understand where we are now as a people, you got to have a sense of where we were, let's say, for the last 100 years. If not, you're going to look at something like, well, he's racist because he called me so-and-so and so-and-so. That is a far cry from what was happening when I grew up. Not only would they call me a racist, they would hang me from a tree, castrate me and burn me up. So in order to, and this country has not done a good job on teaching the history of what has occurred here over the last 100 years, because they run around here ashamed of it as opposed to educating its people so it won't happen again. We're more fired up now than we were 20 years ago. That's where we are today, and the whole world is made up. So the installation here gives me the opportunity to talk. There's no other way I can get your attention. The city is getting a lot of pushback for its development, because all the architectural renderings of what they are getting ready to do just have white people pushing their babies down the street, white people sipping coffee in front of these storefronts. So the mayor sent a memo down saying, why is the people thinking I'm building this stuff for someone else? And I've always been one to speak out of line. So I said, well, all these images in here, I think he's building for someone else too, if I wasn't sitting in here. Yeah, so that's the kind of situation that I find myself in. There's a group of artists out there who are against the city and giving away these places for mural art to people who have years and years in that arena, but the argument doesn't fly because it's based on money. We should be making some of that money too, but my argument has been from the point of view of the viewer. The art should communicate with the subconscious of the people who are looking at it. Now, they don't want to go there because they are a product of their education. You know, art can take you out just as fast as English can. You mean run around and try to speak proper English, you know, in the community. And folks looking at you. What did he just say? You know, you speak proper English, you're going to use different words. And you stand out like a sore thumb. So that's what is happening here.
What makes our theater classes unique is the matrix way that is our mission and that everything we follow. So any student that's in our class writes and produces a show based on what they feel is important, and then they perform it at the end. So everything's devised. Our 5-year-olds, 6 and 7-year-olds have a class, figure out what they want to talk about, and then produce a show at the end. So we are really about making sure that students and youth understand that they do have a voice, what they think is important, and then we offer them a venue to speak it, to say it, and to perform it. And that's really what all of our classes are about. When we have residency programs, so when we go into schools, we are more constricted because we have to go along with the grant that we get or the organization, what their goals were for us to present, but all of the teaching artists we have, that's their intention. So we all start with the idea of giving them voice or having them produce something. So if the classes can do that, then that's what they do.
What about, you guys have a very specific location that we were talking right now about. And does a lot of these teaching residencies are connected to the community that you have here, main stage productions? How do you interact with the community that surrounds you?
So about the community, let me give you at least a little bit of a background on the community and then talk about how we interact with the community and new challenges that have come up fairly recently on the community and its demography or its makeup. So originally this was settled, Corktown, right over here by the train station, by the Irish from County Cork, hence Corktown, and they had strip farms, I think they're called. And then in the early 20s, there was an influx of Mexican population that came up to work in the factories, in the Ford factories with the automobile plants. Then there was another influx in the mid-50s that they came up again, another group came up again. And so what originally around here was a Polish, Hungarian, and other Eastern European community moved further to the near ring suburbs in the south, like Allen Park and Lincoln Park, and then Mexican Town became a really strong, sort of almost organically branding itself, as you can see from eating lunch over there.
This was, historically it was Native American and indigenous, but when the French came here, and the church that's behind us, the St. Anne's, it's the second oldest church in the United States. St. Augustine in Florida is the oldest. But the French settled this area, and they had these ribbon farms. They were like 10 acres long, but very narrow. And so a lot of the history is very French-oriented. But the Hungarian community was very large at one time, and you know, the Mexican community, the first Mexican I understand came in 1885, you know, legally through the legal channels. But you know, a lot of my father was undocumented when he came here in the 20s, and so it's very Polish enclaves at one time. Irish, the Corktown is very much an Irish community. And so there's sprinkling of, you know, Lithuanians and Eastern Europeans came when Russia was invading a lot of Eastern Europe, so there was a larger Lithuanian community at one time here. So it's been very diverse, and it's been the attraction for a lot of immigrant communities. I think partially beginning with Ford Motor originally, and then GM had a couple of factories here. So you came here to work for somebody, very blue collar. We either worked in the fields or we worked in the factories. Many years, and it provided a really good middle income living until the economy kind of tanked back in the 90s, 2000s. So questions about anything else?
So we're saying that we were hearing, we just went to Matrix Theater, and we're talking about how the demographics right now of the neighborhood are shifting a lot too.
Yes.
And I wonder, because you know, how you do that in cultural and arts work, how do you get all these communities together to listen to what they would like to see? And Elton was telling us about how he does a lot of work with the community, and so how do you engage in those activities? How do you
know, to provide learning experiences, you know. Public things to see.
Yeah, you were saying, you know, that people, particularly young people, that look at something as a blank slate, they would think things like culture-specific murals would help people understand that they're coming into a place that already has a life.
Sure. Yeah, if you look at Elton's work, you know, people ask me, why does this location have the Mexican icons here? And if it weren't for the Mexican Revolution between 1910, 1916, 1920, I wouldn't be here. You know, a lot of this community wouldn't exist. And
so it is an illusion that's kind of like approaching the history too. Right.
Yeah, so that, you know,
that's actually really provocative, thought-provoking.
Yeah, I paint these soldaderas, which are Mexican women soldiers, and it's kind of like representing the Mexican women still nowadays, right? It's because they fight for what they believe, for their families, you know, in order to continue moving forward, and you know, they're fighters. You know, even if they are not carrying a rifle, yeah, Mexican women are tough. And that's why this community is the way it is, because of many of them.
Yeah, no, and Melton's other work, because of his company being called Corpus, and I've seen some of the stuff that he did for Art Prize, it's dedicated to organ donation, and so, you know, his art also conveys that message, you know, that other belief that he has. So,
yeah, I paint about organ donation. Actually, that's what I like doing, because this is kind of more, let's say, commercial, because I am kind of like working with a customer, say a community or like a business owner or an organization is a customer, and it's kind of more commercial because I'm creating something that is not exactly my vision or my message. So what I do with organ donation is more with like my idea, my vision. But I work with that because I think that my purpose as an artist is spreading out a message of love, you know, and everything I do doesn't come from hate, come from an idea of love, you know, and even representing a community is an act of love itself, you know, and representing and creating these murals that are very respectful for the community and like, you know, trying to provide the community with a better identity for others to understand where they are coming from is an act of love in my idea. So I am an artist who love art and who is trying to spread a message of love all the time.
Yeah, so, you know, that's one approach in terms of, you know, getting more understanding is seeing something with regard to public art and then being able to tell the story and interpret it, and also hear how other people interpret, you know, the work. It's a good first, you know, way to get a dialogue going and understanding going.
So how did this mural, you were talking about the revolution, how did this mural come to be what it's going to be, or what are the ideas behind?
So as I told you, this is going to be located at Mexican Village restaurant, and because of the name of the restaurant called Mexican Village, I thought of this concept, you know, like it's very interesting because we have the train station, and the women soldiers, the soldaderas, used to use the train during the revolution to go up north or down south, right? And the connection with the train and las soldaderas was to me like the very interesting to create a visual out of that. And the idea was representing people coming after the revolution over to this specific area, right? And it's kind of like a good coincidence that the restaurant is called Mexican Villagers, exactly in this area, right? And so that's kind of like the connection. And I wanted to do this like allegory about Mexican women, right? That they are like fighters and tough and like disposed to give their lives for what they love and they believe. Right?
How long has this taken you so far?
I started last year.
Okay.
But the thing is that I started out last year and then I get engaged with other projects and I need to take advantage of the nice weather when it is nice outside. Yeah. So I've been painting outdoor murals for the last session. Mm-hmm. And so I'm coming back to finish. I'm almost there, right? It's really close.
Plus he has an infant daughter.
Yeah.
He's very proud of that. Takes time and energy.
I love that you have blue skies and sunny weather, which I'm experiencing here in Michigan to not have a lot of those days. Yeah. No. So I'm happy that you have that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Secret smile, secret sadness, my heart is filled with gladness. Yesterday I saw a big, beautiful black crow fly by. It must have been 3 feet wide. Spirits don't leave me, spirits that deceive me. I know that I just seem me to be happy.